Good, it's 1:30, so we will begin our liquor control meeting, and we will start with agenda item number 1, approved minutes of the May 15th, 2019 meeting.
So moved.
We have a motion, do we have a second? Motion and a second, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign, motion carries. 2A, application to issue a Class CW alcoholic beverage license to Hofburger Escape LLC, doing business as Rough Cut Social, located at 1100 NP Avenue. Steve?
So we received this application. The CW is beer and wine, does not have a requirement to sell food, and it does allow them to have a physical bar. Their plan is to, this axe throwing seems to be a new popular thing. And so that's what they're planning on doing. They were planning on being here and presenting doing a presentation to us. But then they called this morning and people that were gonna come apparently got sick or something, so weren't able to show up. We did do the background check on this. It came back just absolutely clean. So I don't know if there's any other questions or anything.
Any other comments? Commissioner?
Is there a limit to licenses and how much are they?
There is a limit to the CW. We're not close to the limit yet. The cost is $15,000 initial fee and $1,500 annual.
And they can have a bar.
Yeah, they can have a bar.
That's pretty good. And then how many are there? How many are limited to? Do you know?
I think the limit is like 15, and I think we're at around 8. Cool. I don't know right offhand, but
Thank you.
Very good. Any other comments or questions? Otherwise, we'd accept a motion.
Move to approve.
Can I motion to approve with contingency that we get a detailed plan of the facility? Both building inspections and health have not received a detailed plan
Sure.
for their facility, please.
Sure.
okay.
Got that? Okay, and do we have a second?
Commissioner, would you second then?
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll second that if you didn't feel preempted on your
That's
first
fine.
motion. Okay.
Is that okay? And so Tony, you were in the midst of making a second too. Is that acceptable?
What are we waiting? Like, what are we hoping they don't do? What are we concerned about?
We just have to make sure that they get their plans.
Okay.
Because unless we can approve their plans, we don't know what they're putting in the facility as far as equipment. So usually it's a routine thing, but we need to, and they're not here. But otherwise it'd say, because we've asked for their plans by phone and email, and we haven't received anything. So we need to get detailed plans, just not a sketch on a bar napkin. So we need to get those before we approve the facility. And I think it's a technicality, but let's put that contingent in this motion. So then that they get that to it before they go to the commission.
License.
And that is what we do with other applications. So it isn't like we're making them do something extra.
Nope.
Okay. You all right with it? Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Number 2B, application to issue a Class Y alcoholic beverage license at Conrath Brewing Company, LLC, doing business as, I'm sure someone else can say it better than me if I'm saying it incorrectly. Conrath Brewing Company, to be located at 630 First Avenue North, number 6. Steve?
So if this location sounds familiar, that's the location where Drecker had their building downtown. And so they were going to vacate the premise and, we're able to come to an arrangement with Conrath. It is a hard one to say. And to apply for a license. And so it's not a transfer. They're applying to get their own license. It's not a transfer of a license, anything like that. And so it's going to be doing the same thing, just taking over that existing space. So
Cool.
Done the background check and that's come back good. And then I know how much you like the editorial comments and stuff. So I did go out to Mapleton where his place is out there, and I've sampled 4 of his beers and they were all excellent. So
Go.
All at the same time?
all one time, but my wife was driving, so we were.
That's even better.
Yeah.
Any other comments? Otherwise, we will accept a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. 2C, application to transfer Class A alcoholic beverage license from Firebox LLC, doing business as Firebox, to International African Restaurant and Nightclub LLC, doing business as International African Restaurant and Nightclub to be located at 4554 7th Avenue South. Steve.
So a couple of things here. The Firebox is a license that they acquired from Olive Garden and then changed their mind and never did open a bar. And so they've been looking to try to find a place for that for a long time. Secondly, the location, the proposed location here is where JT Cigarros was. So it's a building that's been sitting vacant. Now, I'm going to let the chief address some of the concerns about the background check, but you know, those two things would be good things to get taken care of, the transfer of that license to get it back into play and to use that location in a purposeful manner.
Well, thank you, Steve. As part of the background check, we look at both criminal history and financial history, and we had some outstanding things on the financial side or credit side that needed to be taken care of, and as far as we can tell, those have been taken care of. However, on the criminal history, we had some felonies for both of the applicants. Criminal history of 2007, theft by deception in Pennsylvania, which is a felony 3rd degree, pled guilty to that. In 2015, theft 1st degree general over 10,000 in Iowa, that also a felony, convicted. The other, that was for Francis Brown, and the other one was Corey Schultz, the other applicant in 2004, pled guilty to delivery of controlled substance in Cass County, a felony. So those are my areas of concern. Because of those felony level crimes, I voted not to recommend. Or excuse me, yeah. Do not recommend on the application. We've had some conversations in the past at Liquor Control as to what we would accept for criminal history and credit history, and on the criminal history, we have said that felonies were something that we wouldn't accept. And that has been our practice.
As a point of reference, Fargo Municipal Code 25-15-12, Section B, number 3, the Section B is the area that kind of gives the commission the direction as to, you know, when to be looking at, you know, suspending or revoking a license, that type of thing. And number 3, it says the licensee that has been convicted of a felony under the crimes of the United States or laws of one of several states. So, you know, we've had that long standing in there that, you know, felony convictions are a reason to forfeit the license, so.
Any other comments? And anybody in the audience, if you wish to make a comment, you're welcome to do that too. So, and if you want to use that podium right there, that'd be great. Go ahead.
This mic is live, I believe. Okay, yes, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Stephen Baird. I'm appearing today on behalf of Francis Brown and Corey Schultz and their request to transfer a liquor license, which they are in the process of attempting to purchase. You know, there's been some concern raised about previous criminal issues that both Francis and Corey have had. And while they are here today to answer any specific questions that you may have, I wanted to first address the issue just a little bit with you. You know, although they have both had previous criminal convictions, they are upstanding members of society today. Their previous run-ins with the law don't make them bad people and should not be a permanent stigma which forever bars them from pursuing their businesses or their goals. Francis's conviction was 5 years ago and stemmed not from some conscious attempt at a bad act on his part, but largely from proximity to a crime and poor choice of friends at the time. Since then, he has maintained a successful business, which is especially popular among a frequently overlooked immigrant community in the area and provides them with comfort food and a taste of home. And he has also been a loving husband and father. Corey's conviction was 15 years ago, and since that time, he has been a model citizen and businessman. He's also a loving husband and a member in good standing of his community. Now, there can be no doubt that both Francis and Corey are completely different people today than they were when they were convicted. They are fully rehabilitated and are law-abiding members of the community. They should not continue to be stigmatized and labeled because of the mistakes which they have long since moved on from, and they should not be prohibited from engaging in businesses beneficial to themselves and the community because of these prior mistakes. The state of North Dakota also agrees on this point. This past legislative session, the state legislature passed and the governor signed House Bill 1282. This bill created a new section of the North Dakota Century Code, 12.1-33, dealing with the rights of convicted individuals. Among other provisions, this law says that persons convicted of crimes do not suffer permanent loss of civil rights. It also prohibits state licensing agencies from disqualifying anyone from obtaining a license solely for the reason of their prior conviction. Although this statute does not directly prohibit municipalities from denying licenses, like we're discussing today based on prior convictions, it does express a clear state interest in ensuring that the people of this state are not permanently limited based on their prior convictions. It expresses a hope that those who have paid for their mistakes and have been rehabilitated into society are able to function as any other member of that society without being unfairly judged for those past mistakes. North Dakota is the sort of state where we don't define someone by their past mistakes. We view them as who they are now and treat them as their current actions dictate. And that's all we ask, that Francis and Corey be fairly judged based on who they are today rather than based on mistakes that had been made years ago. Thank you.
Commissioner.
Chief, could you tell me about the most recent conviction?
That would be for Francis Brown,
5 years ago?
2015.
4 years ago, okay.
2015, is, I don't know the details of the actual incident, but theft first degree, called, in Iowa, they call it theft first degree general, over $10,000, convicted felony. So that is a suspended sentence, 3 years probation completed, and then assault causing bodily injury, convicted misdemeanor, suspended sentence, 3 years probation completed.
Do we know if the sentence was carried out without incident? So it was probation. Was there?
It says completed, so I would recommend, I would guess that means that it was carried out and completed.
And so, Steve, maybe you can talk about too, are there some other options that they could do? Because I'll just give you my personal opinion. So Corey Schultz, that was, 15 years ago. That was a long time ago, and that wasn't quite as, I guess that was a felony too, but it was quite a while ago. Are there some other options that they could look at where they could still participate but not be the sole source? Are there some things there?
That's a tough one to answer. Certainly they could continue to run their restaurants and those types of things. It's, what we're looking at is the ability to deal in alcoholic beverages. And so, I don't know.
Okay. No, that's good. I don't know if anybody else, if you want to go up and go to the podium, you're welcome to.
I'm Corey Schultz. So, back in 2003, I was arrested for, as you know, these charges. And since then, I've changed my life around. I went to a Christian academy and graduated, and I've lived a clean life ever since. And I've no criminal convictions since then, no misdemeanors, maybe a speeding ticket or two. But I've changed my life around, and I live in Ashley, North Dakota, so I'll be out of Ashley running the business too. So,
How long have you owned the business for?
when I'm running now, 15 years.
Very good. Thank you very much. And I guess my perspective, like I said, for him, that's quite a while ago. And obviously he's changed his life and has lived run a business and things like that. So from my perspective, and maybe if you want to get up and talk, you sure can, but you don't have to. But we should hopefully give people a second chance. But on the other side, it's a liquor license, and we have to be careful that we handle those responsibly. So go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Francis Brown, and I'm from Liberia, and I've been living in the city of Fargo here for a very long time, and I changed my life around like Corey, and he's my friend, and my attorney Steve knows me, and I've been in the community doing business here for like a very long time, paying hundreds of thousands of dollars in tax to basement, and I've never been in trouble in Fargo. And if you look at my past conviction, it was something that they got to force you to plead guilty to something that you never do. It's just a conspiracy. It's not my my art is not my life. And like I said, I've been in Fargo here for a very long time, doing business here in Fargo. Everybody in Fargo here, down to the police, the mayors, the librarian community, everybody know me, that I'm a peaceful man.
So can I ask you, you've owned some businesses in Fargo now. Do you know about how long you've done that?
I've been doing this for 5 years, and I pay tens of thousands of dollars every month for tax in this city. And I've been very peaceful. And nobody here will ever tell the city here that I'm a bad person. I just come to apologize to you or to let you know that they should help us to open our business, me and Corey, and the JTC got building. We have spent $500,000. And if we do not have our liquor license from the fire bar, we would be downhearted, and we would be very, very downhearted. And
Commissioner Gehrig.
So
please.
I understand the concern. I really do. On the other hand, you know, like he's saying, these folks have obviously done better. They've owned businesses. We as liquor control, if there is an issue tomorrow, we can pull the license if we want to as a commission. So I'm going to move to approve it. Give these guys a shot. We have a vacant building. They have a business that is in demand. They've obviously done some good things here in the community. So I'll move to approve, and I hope people give them a chance.
Any other comments? Any other questions?
I'll second it for discussion.
So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
So I have a question for Nancy, I guess, as legal counsel. And maybe you need to look into this a little bit, but are we at odds with our ordinances then?
Well, not necessarily at odds with the ordinances, but I do want to look into, and I was actually going to mention that sometime back, there was some policy guidelines that were implemented or discussed, at least for background checks and kind of more parameters. I don't have that right now in front of me. I was frantically looking through my book, so I've asked my staff to send it to me. But I do think we have had discussions in the past that would more directly address those parameters, and I don't recall whether a 5-year-old felony conviction was specifically addressed in those parameters. But certainly this is provided for in the guidelines or in the ordinances that you can consider it and whether or not to grant that liquor license.
Mr. Gehrig.
Did we approve those guidelines?
That's what I don't recall specifically, so I'm looking for that approval, and I did think it went up to City Commission as well for approval. So I will need to follow up with that, but I don't have it presently in front of me.
I remember the discussion on that because we were debating, you know, from DWEs and, you know, how long is long? You know, is it 5 years, is it 10 years? I remember their discussion, putting a hard parameter on there so then we don't have to have this discretionary decision. So it'd be interesting to see if we get that information.
I believe it was rejection on felonies, and for Class A misdemeanors, it was probably somewhere around 3 or 5 years, and Class B misdemeanors, it was 2 years, something to that effect. I'm not exactly sure.
That's what I was thinking as well, but since I don't have it in front of me, I couldn't state for sure. Like I said, I did ask my staff to send it to me, but we also want to find out exactly how it was moved forward and whether it was approved by this commission and move forward from there. So I guess at this point, I don't have any other guidance other than it does indicate in our ordinances that the criminal background is an important element in whether or not a license is issued.
So I guess we have a couple alternatives for this. Let's say hypothetically that we voted on it and we approved it, then it would go to the city commission, and then by then Nancy would have the information. The other option is we could table this and continue this to our next meeting, and then Nancy can bring it back to liquor control, and then we can go from there. So that's open to everybody's conversation and consideration.
This is just a recommending body anyway, so it's going to go to the city commission either way. So even if we vote to deny, it's still going to have the public hearing at city commission. But we certainly can table it and try to address it here.
But Nancy, I mean, it's not going to take you very long to find out what we did and have a clear answer for us. So, I mean, if we, like I said, if hypothetically we move this ahead to the commission, you would have that answer for us before the next meeting.
Yes, I was kind of hoping I'd have it by the end of this meeting for you, but I don't see that that's going to happen. So I should be able to get it to you shortly.
I like where your mind's at. We're gonna know either way. Delaying it to the next liquor control isn't gonna provide any new information as far as what they did. It's just gonna provide information on our guidelines, so.
And it is city commission that makes the final decision, so,
Yeah.
you know,
Could a guy table it to the city commission contingent on the policy?
we could just send it to the city commission without a recommendation. Normally, we send it with a recommendation of approval or denial, so.
Steve, I like the way you think. I like dodging anything that we pass in the buck whenever possible.
So are we doing an amendment to the motion, or are we, because I'm moving to approve it for this committee. There was a second. If someone wants to modify that, they certainly can. Otherwise, they'd have to vote to get rid of it, right? Or vote it down.
Or vote it down. We can either amend the motion on the table or call the question and vote it down,
So
so.
that's somebody else's call. I'm still moving to approve. There was a second. If someone wants to amend that, or we just vote and vote no, then that's fine.
Okay, so if it's okay with you, I think we should act on what, because you're the one that made the motion, and so I think it would be your call if you want to change it, correct? So I think let's, if that's all right with it, are we ready for the vote? And we'll go from there.
Okay.
Okay.
And I'll do
Any
it.
other comments from the audience? Any comments? Okay, all those in favor say aye.
I think we didn't do a roll call, maybe.
All right, oh, there you go. Steve, you're on the ball today, so thank you for being.
Larson,
I'll say aye.
Todd,
No.
Gehrig,
Yes.
Sprague, no. And Pepcorn.
So it's tied?
Yep.
I vote yes. Okay, motion carries, and so now that will go on to the city commission, and then at that time, there'll be more opportunity for discussion, and Nancy will have the answers for us, because the flip side of this is, we want to make sure that we are following our policy. So if it turns out that our policy is something different, then that changes the direction. All right. Very good. Moving on to number 3, update the Fargo Air Show to allow patrons to carry beer purchased at concessions around air show grounds. Steve?
So just an update on our discussion last time we met. One of the people observing came up and asked, how is this different than the Fargo Dome? And then Nancy and I started, talking it over and thinking about it, and it really isn't different than that. And so rather than needing to change the ordinance and allow for the open carry at the air show, all they really need to do is have the e-permit, like they've done in the past, and they should be able to, go through that area with an open container. There were some other concerns too that we're discussing with the air show committee. One is to, make sure that somebody 21 isn't buying the beer and then handing it to someone under 21, so they're gonna do wristbands. And then the other thing is to make sure that the people have had server training. And so we're working on those elements, and the air show's been very good to work with. So no need to change the ordinance. That was kind of the update.
Thank you, Steve. Number 4, penalty matrix discussion.
So we've had this on a couple of times. We have a full panel today. The only comment that I've received back over the last 2 months is one person commenting that, like when the FAA if they don't meet the food sales, that instead of just closing 1 hour early, they're suggesting that they, close at like 10 o'clock or something like that. So instead of closing at 2, and that would further define that they are a restaurant. So that's the only comment that we've received from anybody regarding the penalty matrix as it was out there.
And I don't know, Chief, if you want to talk about that. We've kind of worked on it, and it's kind of been a while ago now, but I really like, it's the same kind of thing, making it objective instead of subjective, and actually having this written down. And I think we've had opportunity for the public to comment on it, and I think we have had this on our website and things like that, so.
And I've emailed it out to my listserv, and so people have had it.
Right, so, part of that subcommittee, we came up with a matrix of some thoughts and some ideas we had, and that subcommittee consisted of a couple of us board members and some liquor license holders, and then some, at-large committee members. And Nancy was involved in that also, along with Steve. And so we came up with some ideas for that, which we had handed out previously, and then Nancy was able to create a matrix of existing ordinance to make it a little bit more understanding. The big difference is in these two different matrices is one is a five-step or 5 offenses and the penalties associated with each one, and then the cities is a 7 offenses or 7 steps, and the penalties associated with each one. So the difference would be that, of course, fewer steps, and then Nancy and I have been talking about having we call it a 12-month revolving time period. Am I correct, Nancy? Am I saying that 12-month revolving time period? Whereas if you have a penalty, that's when your 12 months starts, and if you get through that 12 months, then you can start anew without having any other penalties. However, if you get 6 months into that 12 months and you have another penalty, you reset that time, correct?
Right. The idea, the discussion was that really what we're looking for in terms of the repercussions on the license is have they recuperated or done what needed to be done in order to keep the license, and that would be going a certain period of time without having any violations. The way it presently is, it's during an 18-month time period, and then it's kind of a reset. So if you had a violation in month 15, you wouldn't reset at month 18. That would be the third violation. If you had another one in 3 months or 4 months, that would be the 4th violation, so that there's the performance has improved for an extended period of time.
And so I have a question. So one of them is the sale of alcoholic beverages to underage people. So that's $500 for the first time that happens. What is the fine if you're a minor and you try to buy alcohol? Shouldn't it be the same?
It isn't.
It isn't, but that's not something that the license structure here would address. That's something that would be prosecution in municipal court.
It's an ordinance. But it seems kind of unfair that the person breaking the law has less of a penalty, at least to me. Because isn't the minor the one that's breaking the law?
Well, we're talking about criminal infractions, and that's what the minor purchasing alcohol on their own would be. The matrix that we're talking about today are administrative sanctions that would go towards the license holders. I think that you have to hold license holders to a pretty high standard by the way they conduct their business and including the application process. You have to hold them to a high standard because, like the mayor said at our commission meeting, having a liquor license is a privilege, not a right. You have to earn that privilege. You can lose that privilege if you're not conducting business in the way you should. And because if you're not conducting business the way you should, it can have an effect on the neighborhood and the community surrounding that business.
Absolutely. It's a hypothetical question.
No, it's a good question.
And I think.
I get that all the time about, the criminal versus the administrative.
So let me ask about this. So what's the next step for this, Steve? Is this something that we would, once again, pass on to the city commission? Or at this point, where are we at?
Well, so right now, what we have are 2 matrices. One that was developed by a subcommittee that was never adopted, and the other one is based on our current code. I would think that what we would want to do is look and see, are there changes to the current code that we want to make? And then, Nancy could make those changes. And then we do have because of the work she's done, we have a matrix that people can post on their bulletin board instead of you know, having, you know, all of this is in the code, but in order to find out what the penalty is, you have to, you know, read through the code because it's spread out, so.
So maybe Nancy, maybe if I could ask you, so for our next meeting, if you could do like a red line to show, here's what our existing ones are and this is what would change? Could we do something like that? Or is that what you were thinking?
No, actually, that's not what I was thinking. That's what my directive was the first time, and I said, I don't know what I'm doing here, so I have to go back and look at what we have existing. Now we've got kind of a side-by-side. This is what's existing. This is what was proposed. I don't know if you want me to change all of them, leave the existing and change one of you know, if it's proposed differently. I'm looking for that direction because I don't want to go back and change every one of them to match the task force because I don't think that's what's intended here.
Okay.
So I don't think that redlining our existing ordinances to match the task force was intended.
Feel free to shoot down the chairman whenever
Sorry.
you want to.
Well, that is why I did the matrix again, taking out our existing ordinances, because what I think we found is we're not that far from what was proposed, but there might be a couple of tweaks that we'd like to see if that's your suggestion. Again, the tweaks might be 5 violations instead of 7. I think there's one penalty that the existing penalty is greater than what was proposed, and I think that was I think it was the engaging in the sale without a license was an immediate, you know, $1,000. And then I think there was at least one other one that, if I recall correctly, the chief said, you know, I want the stricter standard that we have, not what the task force has suggested. And then we talked about the kind of the rolling time frame.
Given the highlight on public safety we've had recently and the fact that we had a task force I met quite a few times that spent quite a few hours looking at this, I would like to see, at least ask the commissioners if they want a brown bag or a meeting beforehand to say, look, here's the changes, here's what we're looking at, here are the competing ideas, to let them at least weigh in before the commission meeting. I can see this being a very long discussion at the commission, and it might get messy during the commission meeting where they want to change 3 things and keep the rest or whatever else. So I'd like to see us at least sit down together publicly and say, look, here's what we proposed, here's what we did, what do you guys think, and what's the direction from there, and then have a vote at the commission meeting. So I would move to ask the other commissioners if they want a brown bag. If they don't, then fine, we'll bring over what we have. But if they do, we'll set that up, meet, and talk about it because it is an important issue. It has had substantial conversation in the community recently, and I think that they would want to see that before we decided.
So Steve, can you arrange that? And I do think, even if we had a short list of what the changes are, kind of the main ones, just to show. And I do think from the retailers, the question about the time frame, that wasn't important. I had several people ask that question. When does the clock start? When does it reset? So I think, and the other thing I will say is if you have more questions about this matrix from the retail standpoint, let us know if there's some more concerns. But like you said, we worked on this. It's been a couple of different times, and so I think
It was interesting because we had our annual meeting with all the license holders and we gave the matrices to them and said, this is the time where we want to hear from you. We're going to give you some time to hear from one person. So I think Nancy's right that we almost have to go side by side. Okay, what do you want changed in this ordinance and what do you want to leave as is? And it's going to have to be individually going through them one at a time.
okay.
So we'll set up a brown bag, or at least see if the commissioners
if they
want
want,
to do that. Yep. And before we do that, though, the chief and I will work on getting these side by side so it's easy to identify what those changes are.
Yep, that sounds great. Any other comments? Otherwise, that is the end of our agenda. It's 2:04. Thank you very much for attending and have a good afternoon. We are adjourned.